You spend your whole life building something, thinking it'll mean security for the people you love. I was born in a small town in Illinois, but I made my fortune out west, in Oregon, turning a little software company into a national success. 32 years, more missed birthdays and holidays than I care to admit. Also, my family would never have to struggle like I did. I thought my son, Tyler, understood that. But the day I signed the deal to sell Maddox Digital for $31 million, the first thing out of his mouth wasn't congratulations, it was a demand. $5 million. Dad, it's just a small piece. I've got debts, and I want to start something of my own. The greed in his eyes was new. Or maybe I just hadn't wanted to see it. Sophie, my daughter-in-law, hovered in the doorway, arms crossed. She didn't say much, but her glance at Tyler, the tiny nod she gave, told me she was the one pushing him. She'd always been ambitious, fancy law degree, big dreams, and a knack for making my son feel like nothing he did was ever enough. I tried to keep the peace. Come to the retirement party tomorrow, I told them, forcing a smile. Bring Sophie's folks. Let's celebrate. Then we'll talk about what comes next together. Tyler scoffed, acting like I was some miser holding out on him. Don't expect us if you don't help. Don't expect us for Thanksgiving, Christmas, nothing. I just stared at him, the kid who used to beg me to take him to minor league baseball games. When had he become a stranger? When they left, I sat in my office for a long time. I looked at the pen I'd used to sign the deal, the same one I used to write checks for field trips and braces. Now my own son saw me as a bank account, not a father. Later, as I walked through the empty house, I wondered where I'd gone wrong. My wife, and past 10 years ago. I'd raised Tyler by myself after that, doing the best I could. I guess I'd given him everything except the ability to be grateful. The next morning, the house buzzed with activity. The catering crews set up tables in the backyard overlooking the Columbia River. I wanted the party to feel like a new beginning, a thank you to old friends and loyal employees, a chance to breathe for the first time in decades. Tyler texted to say they'd be there, and that Sophie's parents, Chuck and Linda Foster, were driving in from Seattle. I tried to feel hopeful. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe my son just needed time to adjust. By 6 o'clock, guests filled the patio. The smell of cedar and grilling salmon drifted on the breeze. I made my way from group to group, shaking hands, hugging old friends, and dodging Tyler's sullen stare from across the yard. Sophie was the perfect host's wife, charming, attentive, laughing at the right moments. But every time I looked her way, she was glancing at her phone or at me, her expression tight, calculating. Her parents arrived just before sunset, polite, if a little nervous. We hadn't met more than a few times. When the champagne was poured, and the sun dipped behind the hills, I called everyone together for a toast. Tyler hovered beside Sophie, who slipped away for a moment to the drink table. That's when I saw it. Just a flicker, a tiny motion. Sophie reached into her purse, palmed a small envelope, and shook something into my wine glass. She looked up, scanning the crowd, then stirred the glass and walked away. My heart pounded. 30 years in business had taught me when something was wrong. And in that moment I knew. I didn't know if Tyler knew, or if he was just the pawn. While everyone gathered around, I quietly moved to the table. Sophie's father, Chuck, was standing nearby, admiring the view. Our glasses looked nearly identical, both filled with Oregon Pinot Noir. Without drawing attention, I swapped them, mine for his for mine. I tried to focus on my speech as I raised the glass, but I could barely breathe. I watched Sophie's eyes, wide and expectant, fixed on the glass I'd just handed her own father. Here's to new beginnings, to family, and to the future, I said, forcing a smile. As the group cheered and sipped, I watched Chuck take a long drink from the glass Sophie had tampered with. I don't know what will happen next, but as I looked around at the faces, some filled with love, some with calculation, I realized my fight for family had only just begun. I've lived long enough to recognize when the air in a room changes. And after that first toast, the air shifted. The chatter died down. Sophie was watching her father like a hawk, her smile frozen. Tyler, my son, stood awkwardly by the buffet, pretending not to notice, but his eyes kept flicking back to the drink table. It was only a minute later that Chuck Foster, Sophie's dad, started to look off. At first, he just pressed his fingers to his forehead, like maybe the wine was hitting him too hard. But then he went pale. "Linda, I'm not feeling so good," he mumbled, clutching his side. Linda looked at him, concerned, and Sophie rushed to his side with a performance that belonged on Broadway. "Dad, are you okay? Do you need to sit down?" Someone called for help. I kept my distance, heart pounding, watching as the caterer guided Chuck to a chair. Sophie kept patting his shoulder, eyes flicking to me every few seconds. I could see the calculations turning behind her eyes. Had she noticed the glasses got swapped? Was she wondering if I'd seen her little trick? Tyler didn't say a word, just stood there, jaw clenched, as Chuck's breathing got shallower. Someone in the crowd dialed 911, and within minutes, the paramedics were in my backyard, moving with calm efficiency. They checked Chuck's vitals, asked questions. Sophie looked ready to faint, but I didn't buy it for a second. Linda kept wringing her hands. "It's probably his blood sugar," she whispered. But Sophie wouldn't meet her mother's eyes. The party ended in a rush. Guests scattered, whispering. The ambulance lights flashed red and blue across my garden as they loaded Chuck in. Sophie and Tyler followed them out, Sophie crying, Tyler stone-faced. Linda apologized a dozen times, cheeks blotchy with stress. When the last guest left, I sat alone on the back porch, the uneaten cake melting on the table, party favors abandoned by the door. The only sound was the distant traffic on the highway and the river beyond. I replayed the scene over and over. Sophie's hand, the powder, the switch. Did Tyler know? Was this all Sophie, or was my own son in on it? My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tyler. "Sorry about the party. Things got crazy. We'll call tomorrow." No mention of his dad-in-law, no sign of worry for me. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. I barely slept that night. Every creak in the house made me jump. Was Sophie going to come back? Would Tyler? Or had I just declared silent war on my own family? The next morning, I got a call from Linda. "Chuck's stable. The doctors said it was some kind of reaction, but they're running tests. He's awake now, just tired." She hesitated. "Sophie and Tyler are staying with us for a while. She's upset." I thanked her, wished Chuck a speedy recovery, and hung up. My hands shook so badly I spilled my coffee. In 65 years, I'd built a business, buried a wife, raised a child. Nothing had prepared me for this kind of betrayal. I had a choice to make. Pretend nothing happened, try to keep the peace, or start getting some answers. The grandpa in me, the soft touch, wanted to just call it a bad coincidence, to believe the best about my own flesh and blood. But the old man in me, the survivor, knew better. You don't build a company without learning how to spot a con. I started with my security cameras. The tech guys who'd installed them always bragged about the system's clarity. I pulled up the footage on my laptop and scrolled to the time when Sophie made her move. Sure enough, there it was. Sophie, glancing over her shoulder, then reaching into her purse and dropping something into the glass. Proof. Cold, hard, undeniable. I didn't call the police, not yet. Family deserves a chance to explain themselves. But I copied the file to a USB drive and locked it in my safe. I wasn't going to let my guard down again. The next few days, I kept myself busy. Sorted through the retirement paperwork, called my old friends, checked in with the accountant. My lawyer. Mr. Franklin noticed the tension in my voice. Everything all right, Mason? He asked. Just tired, Bill. I lied. Family drama. He chuckled. Retirement brings out the best and worst in people. You let me know if you need any help. I almost laughed at the understatement. Help? What kind of help do you need when your son and daughter-in-law might be plotting your demise? That evening, Tyler called. He was subdued, almost apologetic. Dad, Sophie's a wreck. She thinks you blame her for what happened to her father. I kept my tone even. I saw something strange at the party, Ty. Your wife, she put something in a wine glass. I don't know what, but I swapped them. Your father-in-law drank it. Silence. For a long moment, I could only hear the sound of Tyler's breathing. You're saying Sophie tried to poison you? I'm saying I know what I saw. And I've got the camera footage to prove it. Tyler didn't argue. He just said, I'll come over tomorrow. We need to talk. I spent that whole next morning waiting, pretending to read the paper, but I was really just watching the driveway. The coffee went cold in my mug. Outside, the sky was gray and Oregon drizzle painted the windows. I wondered what kind of conversation Tyler and Sophie were having before he came over. Did she confess? Did he demand answers? Or were they plotting their next move, thinking old Mason wouldn't dare push back? By noon, Tyler's truck rolled up. He stepped out slowly, not rushing like the old days when he'd come running to tell me he hit a home run or got an A on his report card. His hair was messy, eyes red, and he looked like he hadn't slept much either. He barely knocked before letting himself in. I was standing by the kitchen counter, trying to look busy. Want coffee? I asked. It was just habit. Fathers ask sons that, no matter what else is going on. Tyler shook his head. He looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, half ashamed, half scared. Dad, I need you to tell me exactly what you saw. So I did. I told him about Sophie at the wine table, her hand in her purse, the quick flick of her wrist, the powder falling into my glass, how I switched them. How his father-in-law got sick. Tyler listened in silence, fists clenched. Are you sure? He asked quietly. You're absolutely sure she did something to your glass? I'm sure, son, I said. And I've got it on camera. His face twisted. She swore she didn't do anything, Dad. She cried all night, saying you must have misunderstood. That maybe you were tired or stressed or... He trailed off, and I could see the hope draining out of him. I wanted to believe that, I admitted. But I can't ignore what I saw. He ran his hands through his hair. Dad, what do you want to do? I looked at him, my only child, the last real family I had left. I want the truth, Tyler. Not excuses, not tears. If Sophie made a mistake, if this was some terrible misunderstanding, she needs to say it to my face. If not... I didn't finish the sentence. Tyler swallowed. Okay. I'll bring her over. She's not leaving town. Her dad's still in the hospital. She'll have to face this. After he left, I called my old friend, George Matthews. He'd been a detective in Portland for 30 years before retiring to the coast. We played cards every Thursday. If anyone knew how to handle a mess like this, it was George. He showed up an hour later with a six-pack and a notebook, wearing the same plaid jacket he'd owned since 1992. Mace, you got yourself in a real family pickle, don't you? He said, sitting at my kitchen table. I need advice, George. Not a police report. Not yet. He nodded. Tell me what happened. I replayed everything, including the footage on my laptop. George watched without saying a word, his eyes narrow and focused. When it ended, he just shook his head. That's pretty damning, Mace. I've seen people try to cover their tracks, but your daughter-in-law isn't very subtle. He paused, then said quietly, You want to involve the police? You have enough for an investigation. I stared at the floor. What if I just scare her straight? Let her know I know, maybe she'll back off. Maybe she'll confess, and Tyler can see her for who she really is. George put a hand on my shoulder. Be careful. Cornered people get desperate. But it's your call. You want me to stick around when she comes over? I nodded. Stay close. Maybe in the den. If things get out of hand, you step in. That evening, the storm clouds finally broke, and the house felt 10 degrees colder. Tyler's car arrived just after dark. Sophie stepped out with him, her hair pulled back, face pale. She didn't look at the house as they walked up the steps. I met them in the entryway. Let's talk in the living room, I said, voice even but not inviting. George was nowhere in sight, but I knew he was listening. We sat in a triangle, me in my old recliner, Tyler on the sofa, Sophie perched on the edge of the armchair, twisting her wedding ring. Sophie, I said, I saw what you did at the party. I want to hear it from you. Why? She tried to meet my eyes but couldn't. Her voice was shaky. Mr. Carter Mason, I didn't mean to hurt anyone. It was supposed to be harmless. Just something to make you drowsy. Tyler and we were hoping you'd sign over a gift before the money disappeared into retirement accounts. I just thought if you were a little out of it. Tyler jerked away from her, shock and fury etched across his face. Sophie, what the hell? You said you didn't do anything. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I didn't want to hurt your dad. I was desperate. We're so deep in debt, Ty. I'm scared. I thought if he saw reason, if he was vulnerable, maybe he'd be more generous. I never wanted your dad to get sick, I swear. I sat in silence, the weight of it pressing on my chest. You nearly killed your own father, Sophie. For money. For nothing. Sophie buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Tyler just stared at her, his world crumbling. In the silence, George entered the room, his voice calm but firm. You're lucky it didn't end worse. You understand what you've done, right? This is attempted poisoning, no matter how you spin it. Sophie looked up, terror in her eyes. Please, Mason. I'll do anything. Just don't go to the police. Don't ruin my life. I made a mistake. I'll make it right. I looked at her. The only way to make this right is to take responsibility. And for you, Tyler, to decide who you are, my son, or someone else's accomplice. The room was so quiet, I could hear the storm picking up again outside. I wondered if our family would ever recover from this, or if this was the moment we all lost each other forever. It's a strange thing, realizing your whole life can tilt on a single decision made by someone you trusted. After Sophie's confession, the room was heavy with a silence I've only ever felt at funerals. I stared at the woman my son called his wife, the woman I'd welcomed into this house, shared holiday meals with, trusted around my most precious memories. I saw her then not as a daughter-in-law, but as a stranger. George gave her a long, tired look. If I weren't retired, I'd have to call this in, you know. You're lucky Mason's giving you any chance at all to fix this. Sophie was crying, trying to talk through hiccups and apologies. Tyler kept his head in his hands, his wedding ring glinting in the lamplight. I wanted to shout, to tell them both how badly they'd hurt me, but I just felt tired, old in a way I hadn't in years. You put something in my glass, I said quietly, hoping to cloud my mind and push me into a corner. Maybe you thought I'd sign over some big chunk of my retirement. But you didn't just hurt me. You risked your own father's life. She looked up, mascara streaked down her face. I'm so sorry, Mason. I'll do anything. I never wanted anyone hurt. The truth is, I believe that. I didn't think Sophie had murder in her heart, not really. She had greed, fear, desperation, maybe even love for my son, in her own twisted way, but not evil. Still, good intentions can do plenty of damage. I'd seen it before, in business and in life. Tyler finally looked at me, his voice raw. Dad, what happens now? Do we go to the police? I glanced at George, who gave a barely perceptible nod. I should, I said honestly. If you were anyone else, Sophie, I'd call the sheriff this instant. You're lucky my grandson isn't old enough to see this side of his parents. You're lucky I still remember what it's like to be scared. For a moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the wind rattling the gutters. Sophie wiped her eyes and whispered, Please, Mason, I'll do anything to fix this. I'll leave. I'll confess. Just don't put Tyler through a scandal. Don't destroy our family. I stood up, feeling every one of my 65 years. You're going to call your parents, Sophie. You're going to tell them the truth about what happened at the party, and what you put in that drink. Then you're going to check in with Chuck's doctors, and you're going to make sure he's okay. After that, you and Tyler are leaving my house, tonight. Tyler opened his mouth to argue, but I raised a hand. No. This is my home. I need space to think. I need time to decide what comes next. And you both need to learn that actions have consequences, even for family. They nodded, defeated. Sophie reached for her phone, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Tyler helped her up, and together they walked to the guest room to pack. George lingered, patting my shoulder. You did the right thing, Mace. You gave them mercy most people wouldn't. But you need to protect yourself now. I nodded, too numb for words. When the door closed behind George, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the old photograph of Anne and little Tyler on the nightstand. My wife's eyes looked kind, understanding, even in black and white. I tried to imagine what she'd say if she'd seen this night. You can forgive, Mason, but don't forget. Downstairs I heard voices, Sophie, on the phone with her parents, stammering through an explanation, Tyler's voice, low and urgent, promising to take care of things at the hospital. When they finally left, it was almost midnight. Tyler pressed the key into my hand. We'll stay with her folks for now. I'll call you tomorrow. I locked the door behind them, double-checked the security system, and walked the empty rooms. The echoes of laughter, the warmth of family dinners, the clatter of my grandson's toy cars, all seemed like ghosts in the silence. That night I slept with the lights on. You don't recover from betrayal in a single day. The next morning, the phone rang before sunrise. It was Linda Foster. Mason, I don't know what to say. Chuck is going to be okay, thank God. The doctor said the reaction was mild, but they found traces of some sedative in his blood. Sophie told us everything last night. She paused, voice trembling. I'm so sorry. We raised her better than this. We had no idea. It's not your fault, Linda, I said, meaning it. Kids make their own choices after a certain age. I'm just grateful Chuck is safe. We're going to help her get some counseling, she said. And Tyler, too. They need it. I hope you can forgive them one day, Mason. I hope so, too, I answered, though the words felt heavy in my mouth. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I got calls from a few friends who'd heard about the drama at the party, thanks to neighbors and hospital staff. I kept the details vague, just said there'd been a medical emergency, that everyone was okay now. But inside, I started making changes. I called my attorney and had all my estate documents updated, making sure every dollar of my retirement was locked down tight. I left nothing to chance. I even rewrote my will, putting new safeguards in place for my grandson, should anything happen to me. Years of building, and now I was building defenses against my own family. At sunset, I sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon and watched the sky burn orange over the river. The house was quiet, almost peaceful, but nothing felt quite right. I realized then that this was the true price of betrayal, not anger, not fear, but the loneliness that settles in when trust is broken. Still, I was alive. I was free. And I wasn't about to let anyone, family or not, take that from me. The days that followed felt both endless and hollow. My phone stayed mostly silent, except for a few polite texts from Linda checking in, and a single message from Tyler. We're taking it one day at a time. Dad. Sophie's sorry. We're seeing a counselor. I wanted to answer, to say something comforting, but every word felt false on my tongue. Maybe, I thought, time would soften the anger and disappointment. Maybe not. I poured my focus into things I could control. My lawyer, Bill Franklin, was a rock. He reviewed my trust, set up fresh passwords, made sure not a cent could be moved without my signature. My financial planner suggested more security measures. Even good families go bad over money, he said, not unkindly. Seen it too many times, Mason. I thought of all the stories I'd heard from friends over the years. Fathers cut out of their grandkids' lives, sisters fighting over furniture, whole clans shattered by greed. No, I wouldn't let that be my legacy. I called my friend George again and asked him to recommend a good security company. Within a week, the house was a fortress. Cameras, motion lights, new locks, the works. I even added an emergency call system, just in case. I told myself it was overkill, but deep down I knew better. Once trust is gone, caution is all you have left. Loneliness hit hardest in the quiet moments. I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to call Tyler, wanting to talk baseball or complain about the Blazers' lousy season. But the words dried up before I could dial. Sometimes I'd walk down to the dock, let the cool river air clear my mind. There, I'd talk to Anne out loud, as if she were standing beside me, tell her about the betrayal, about Sophie's tears, about how lost I felt. One morning, as summer crept toward fall, I opened the mailbox and found a thick envelope with no return address. Inside was a letter, written in Sophie's neat, careful script. Dear Mason, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I am so deeply sorry for what I did at your retirement party. There's no excuse for my actions. I was desperate, yes, but that's not a reason, it's just the truth. I thought if you were less guarded, you'd help us, but I never intended to harm anyone. When my father got sick, I realized how badly I'd failed everyone, not just you. Tyler and I are in counseling. I'm looking for a job, and we're selling my car to help pay off some of our debt. I hope one day you'll let us try to rebuild your trust, but I understand if you never want to see me again. Thank you for saving my father's life, even after what I tried to do. I will never forget your mercy. With regret, Sophie. I sat on the porch, letter in my lap, as the sun crept higher over the pines. I wanted to stay angry, to keep my wounds open and raw, but something in Sophie's words chipped away at the stone in my chest. She had confessed, admitted to the worst part of herself, and was doing the one thing that matters after a mistake, trying to fix it. A week later, Tyler called. This time, I picked up. Dad, he said, his voice small. Can I come by and talk? Alone? I agreed, and that evening, he pulled into the driveway in an old Honda. Sophie's BMW must have been sold, just like she'd said. We sat at the kitchen table, a distance between us that had never existed before. Tyler looked older, wearier, but maybe wiser too. I know I failed you, he began. I let money get in the way. I let Sophie's fear take over. But I want you to know I never asked her to do what she did. I just wanted help, Dad. I thought you'd understand. He shook his head. That's no excuse. You've given me everything I needed, even when I didn't deserve it. I listened, letting him talk. When he finished, I said, Son, money changes people. It can make you selfish, blind, desperate. I learned that in business, and now I've learned it in family too. But I don't want it to ruin us. Not if we can help it. He nodded, his eyes rimmed with tears. Sophie and I are starting over. No more shortcuts. No more schemes. If you never want to see us again, I understand. but I hope someday you'll let me bring your grandson to visit. That broke me a little. I reached across the table and took his hand. I want my family, Ty. But I want honesty and respect more. If you can give me that, you're always welcome here. We talked a while longer, about the old days. About the hope that maybe, with time, things could heal. Tyler left just before midnight, hugging me tight, promising to do better. That night, I slept a little easier. Maybe there was a path back, not to what we'd been before, but to something new. Something built on truth. The first time my grandson came back to the house, it was late September, cool wind rattling the leaves from the maples in the front yard. Tyler stood at the door, holding little Oliver's hand, my namesake, though that felt both like a blessing and a burden now. They looked uncertain, almost shy, as if coming home after a long absence. Sophie stayed in the car, watching through the window, not quite ready to cross the threshold. I knelt down to Oliver's level. "Hey, kiddo," I said softly. He looked at me for a moment, then grinned and threw his arms around my neck. Sometimes, I think children know more about forgiveness than adults ever could. Tyler looked nervous as he stepped inside. He handed me a small package, a pie Sophie had baked, her way of saying sorry without showing her face just yet. "She's trying, Dad." "We both are. One step at a time." I nodded. "That's all anyone can do." We sat in the living room, the old place feeling warmer with laughter bouncing off the walls again. Tyler told me about his new job at a car dealership, nothing fancy but honest work. He said Sophie had started teaching part-time at a community college. They'd downsized, sold the fancy furniture, and were living in a little rental out on Willow Lane. We didn't talk about money, not directly. But Tyler handed me a crumpled envelope halfway through our visit. Inside was a check for $500, a first payment, he said, on all the help over the years. I didn't want the money. What I wanted was what he was offering: humility, responsibility, effort. I set the check aside and just looked at my son, the boy I'd raised alone after and died, now grown into a man who finally understood how badly we'd both gotten lost. When they left, I watched Oliver wave from the back seat. Sophie gave a tentative wave too, her eyes red, but her smile real. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. That evening, George stopped by with a thermos of his homemade chili. "Heard you had visitors," he said, settling in beside me on the porch. "Yep," I replied. "Feels like something's shifting, maybe for the better." He nodded. "You know, Mace, sometimes people come back from the edge. Not everyone does, but some do. You gave them a chance. That's rare." I shrugged. "What else can you do? If you give up on family, what do you have left?" George grinned, the lines in his face deepening. "You have me. You have your memories. And if you're lucky, a little peace." We ate in silence, the kind of silence that comes from old friendship and shared battles. I thought about how she'd always found the good in people, even when I only saw their flaws. I hoped she'd be proud of how I'd handled things, even if I wasn't sure myself. As autumn deepened, my life settled into a quieter rhythm. I spent more time fishing, fixing things around the house, volunteering at the local food bank. I ran into Linda and Chuck Foster at the farmer's market, and Chuck shook my hand like nothing bad had ever happened between us. "Thank you, Mason," he said quietly, "for your mercy, and for not giving up on our girl. She's still our daughter, even after everything. We want her to be better, too." I realized then that forgiveness is never just for the person who wronged you. It's for everyone left behind in the wreckage, everyone who needs to believe that second chances are possible. One afternoon in late October, I got a letter in the mail, a handwritten note from Sophie. She wrote about her therapy sessions, about how she was facing the truth of her actions, about how much she missed Oliver's laughter in my backyard. "If you ever feel ready, I'd like to come by myself," she wrote. To apologize in person and help you in the garden, the way and used to. I sat on the porch, the letter trembling in my old hands, and looked at the river, at the light on the water. I wondered how many families would ever get even this far, how many would have the courage to admit their failings, to show up when it mattered, to try again. I took a deep breath, then picked up the phone. I dialed the number I now knew by heart. Sophie? This is Mason. I read your letter. Come by next Saturday. The garden could use some work, and so could my heart. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, quietly, Thank you, Mason. I'll be there. I promise. After we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. The past was still there, every scar, every mistake, but it no longer ruled my future. Saturday arrived bright and brisk, that kind of golden autumn sunlight that makes even old wood and peeling paint look beautiful. I was up early, raking leaves in the backyard, nervous as a teenager before his first date. At 10 sharp, Sophie's car rolled quietly up the driveway. She stepped out, dressed simply, no makeup, no designer purse, just jeans and a sweater. She looked 10 years younger than the last time I'd seen her. She carried a paper sack with garden gloves, a trowel, and 2 cups of coffee. Peace offering, she said, voice shaking a little as she handed me one. From the good cafe. I remember you always liked the dark roast. I took the cup, nodding. I did. And was the only one who could ever brew it right, but this is pretty close. I gestured to the raised beds. Fall cleanup. We can start with the tomatoes. And always said they needed a firm hand, like most people. We worked quietly for a while, Sophie following my lead, pulling up the dead vines, spreading mulch. The yard smelled of earth and wood smoke, and for a few moments, we could have been any grandfather and daughter-in-law, sharing a normal Saturday. Finally, Sophie broke the silence. Mason, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to forget. I just needed to say, face to face, that I am so sorry for what I did. I betrayed your trust, risked my own father's life, and nearly destroyed my marriage. I've learned things about myself these last months that I wish I never had to know. But I'm working to be better. I promise you that. I looked at her, really looked. For the first time, I saw the scared young woman beneath all the sharp edges and ambition. I saw the mother who loved her son, the wife desperate not to disappoint, the daughter who still wanted her parents' approval. And I saw regret, genuine and deep. You hurt me, Sophie, I said, steady and gentle. But you also told the truth, and you tried to fix what you broke. Most folks would have run from that. I can respect that much, even if trust takes time to rebuild. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you. For letting me try. For not turning your back on us forever. We finished the work, and I let her stay for lunch. We sat on the porch, eating sandwiches, watching the river wind past the edge of the property. She told me about counseling, about teaching again, about how she and Tyler were living with less but learning to be happier. I'm not asking for money, she said quietly. I'm asking for a second chance. For Oliver's sake, for Tyler's, and for myself. If you can't, I'll understand. But I want to try. I took a long time before I answered. You've already started trying. That's what matters. I'm not ready to hand out trust like candy, but I'm willing to let you earn it back. For Oliver's sake, and for Anne's memory too. She believed in second chances. We sat in the quiet for a while. The world felt still, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. After Sophie left, I walked the house, feeling the energy shifting, the air lighter somehow. The place wasn't haunted by betrayal anymore, but by hope, small and fragile, but real. That night, I took out the old family album. I lingered on a picture of Anne, holding baby Tyler in her arms, her eyes full of kindness and mischief. I talked to her the way I always did when things felt too big. You'd tell me to keep my heart open, Annie. even when it hurts. Especially then. The days grew shorter, but the visits grew more frequent. Tyler and Oliver came by every Sunday afternoon, sometimes with Sophie, sometimes just the two of them. We started new rituals, pancake breakfasts, fishing at the riverbank, small repairs around the house. Sophie brought cookies, stories from her classes, and even a few jokes that made me laugh for the first time in months. Slowly, the broken places in our family began to knit together, not perfectly, not all at once, but enough that forgiveness had room to take root. On Thanksgiving, Tyler asked if they could host the dinner at their rental house. I hesitated, then agreed. When I walked through their door, I saw the old pie dish and loved on the table, the walls covered in Oliver's crayon drawings, and laughter echoing from the kitchen. The past wasn't forgotten, but it wasn't in charge anymore. That night, as we sat around the table, I raised my glass, not of wine this time, but good strong coffee, and gave a simple toast. To family. To mistakes and to second chances. And to the courage it takes to forgive. There were tears, and there was laughter, and there was hope. I looked around and realized I had what I'd always wanted, even if I'd had to lose it first to understand its worth. Life isn't about never falling. It's about what you do after you've hit the ground. As winter settled in, I felt at peace, knowing that the family I loved was, against the odds, still mine.